They thought no one was watching. But one moment of cruelty can change everything, not just for the person being hurt, but for everyone who witnesses it. Picture a small diner on the edge of town. The kind of place where the coffee keeps coming without asking, and the pie tastes like home. Afternoon light filters through old windows, spreading across worn booths and faded checkered floors. Behind the counter moves a woman in her late 30s, serving hot plates with care. Every so often, her hand rests gently on her rounded belly. Her name is Rose Patterson, 7 months pregnant, steady on her feet, and stronger than she looks. She's worked at Mel's Diner for 3 years, ever since her husband died in a construction accident. This day began like any other. But sometimes, life decides to test people, to show who they really are. And sometimes, the right person happens to be watching when it matters most. Rose had always believed that honest work was something to be proud of. Even now, working long double shifts to save for her baby, she carried herself with quiet dignity. Everyone in town loved her for it. That morning had gone smoothly. Mrs. Henderson from the flower shop left a big tip, and old Tom Bradley asked about her baby with genuine kindness that brought tears to her eyes. From the outside, Mel's Diner wasn't impressive. The red brick walls had seen 40 years of weather, and the neon sign blinked weakly whenever rain clouds rolled in. But inside, it felt warm and alive, a place where regulars chatted over bacon and eggs, and life felt simple again. Rose knew the rhythm of the place like music. She could tell who needed a refill just by how they held their cup. She remembered every regular's order by heart: Mr. Foster's eggs over easy with wheat toast, no butter, little details that made people feel seen. She'd learned to read moods and faces, a skill that grew sharper after losing her husband, Michael. He'd been a kind man, the type who helped neighbors without being asked and always kept jumper cables in his truck. After his accident, the town looked after her for a while. There were casseroles at her door, paid grocery bills, and Mel gave her more hours without question. But slowly, life moved on for everyone else, while Rose was still learning how to live without him. The pregnancy had come as a surprise, a final gift from a love she thought she'd lost. At first, it terrified her. How could she raise a child alone? But when she felt that first flutter inside her and saw her mother's joy, something shifted. She realized this baby was a piece of Michael that would live on. Lately, she'd been hopeful again. The doctor said the baby was healthy, and she'd saved enough for a decent crib. Mel even offered her the small apartment above the diner, just right for a new start. Life wasn't easy, but she was making it work with grit, faith, and the kindness of her little diner family. Around 2 p.m., the lunch crowd began to fade. As Rose wiped down the tables, the doorbell chimed. 3 police officers walked in. She knew them well: Officers Kyle Brennan, Joe Martinez, and the young rookie Danny Walsh. They came by every week, usually for coffee and pie, but today would be different. Because this time, someone else was watching. Rose had always treated the officers with courtesy, though something about Kyle Brennan had never sat right with her. There was a coldness in his eyes, the kind that reminded her of schoolyard bullies who'd simply grown older, not wiser. That afternoon, the 3 officers, Brennan, Joe Martinez, and the young rookie Danny Walsh, took their usual corner booth. Rose approached them with her notepad and a polite smile. "Good afternoon, officers. What can I get started for you?" Brennan looked up from his phone, his expression already sharp and mocking. His gaze swept over her belly with open disdain. Rose instinctively straightened, one hand moving to rest protectively on her stomach. "Well, well," Brennan said loudly enough for nearby tables to hear. "Still waddling around here, huh? Shouldn't you be home taking care of yourself instead of lumbering around a diner?" The words hit her like a slap, but Rose forced herself to stay calm. Her smile didn't fade, even as her cheeks burned. "I'm doing just fine, thank you," she said softly. "Now, what would you like to order?" Martinez shifted in his seat, visibly uncomfortable, while young Walsh stared down at the table, wishing he could vanish. The air grew heavy, and the chatter in the diner began to fade as other customers sensed something ugly unfolding. None of them noticed the quiet man sitting alone at the counter. He wore a plain gray sweater and had been there for nearly an hour, sipping black coffee and finishing a slice of apple pie. He was passing through Millbrook on his way to a board meeting in the city. Something about the simple, homey diner had drawn him in, It reminded him of the places his grandfather used to take him when life was simpler. Now, though, his attention was fixed entirely on the pregnant waitress and the officer speaking to her with such cruelty. Brennan leaned back in his booth, smirking. "I'm just saying, sweetheart, maybe you should think about the example you're setting. Running around here like everything's fine when you should be figuring out how to raise that kid without a husband." Rose froze. The notepad trembled in her hand as she blinked back tears. Her instincts screamed to defend herself, but she also knew she couldn't afford to lose this job. She could feel every pair of eyes on her, customers shifting uncomfortably, unsure whether to speak up or look away. "That's uncalled for," Walsh finally muttered. His voice was barely a whisper, but Brennan shot him a glare that shut him up instantly. "What?" "I'm just being honest," Brennan continued. "Single mothers, welfare babies, it's all a cycle. Look at her. She can barely get around now. What's she going to do when the baby comes? Who's going to take care of it while she's working?" Rose's hands moved instinctively to her belly again, as if to shield her baby from his words. She had endured whispers and pity since Michael's death, but never something this cruel, this personal. Worst of all, his words cut close to her deepest fears: how she would manage alone, how she would provide, how she would be enough. "3 coffees and whatever pie you've got," Martinez said quickly, trying to defuse the moment. But Brennan wasn't done. "Come on, Joe. Don't pretend you don't see it. This is exactly how trouble starts. Kids with no fathers, mothers who can't keep it together. I bet she doesn't even know who the father really is." The diner fell silent. Rose's breath caught. A small sob escaped before she could stop it. Her hand flew to her mouth as tears spilled down her cheeks. The notepad slipped from her fingers and hit the floor with a soft thud. For a few long seconds, no one moved. The only sound was the faint hum of the coffee machine, and the quiet scraping of a chair as the man in the gray sweater slowly stood up. The diner was silent except for the faint hiss of the grill and the soft clinking of coffee cups. Customers shifted uneasily in their seats as Rose stood trembling, trying to hold herself together. "Please," she whispered, her voice cracking. "I just want to do my job." Then something remarkable happened. Mrs. Henderson, the elderly flower shop owner, slowly stood up from her booth and walked over to Rose. She placed a gentle hand on the young woman's shoulder and said firmly, "Honey, you don't need to serve these men another thing. They can get their coffee somewhere else." From the counter, Tom Bradley, the retired mechanic, rose next. "Ladies' right," he said gruffly, nodding toward the officers. "Maybe it's time you boys found a different place to eat." Even quiet Mr. Foster, who usually kept to himself, spoke up from his corner booth. Shaking his head, he muttered, "Known Rose 3 years now. Hardest working woman in this town. Lost her husband in that crane accident over at the Morrison site. Anybody got a problem with how she handles herself can take it up with me." The wave of support seemed to infuriate Brennan. He shoved his chair back with a loud scrape and stood up. "Oh, is that so?" he sneered. "Maybe I should remind everyone here who keeps this town safe. Maybe I should start taking a closer look at this place. Health codes, taxes, you name it." His threat hung heavy in the air. Rose felt her stomach twist. If this escalated, Mel could lose the diner, and she could lose everything she'd worked for. She opened her mouth to apologize, desperate to calm things down. But before she could speak, the quiet man at the counter finally turned around. He looked to be in his mid-40s, dressed simply in jeans and a gray sweater. But the subtle gleam of a high-end watch on his wrist hinted that he wasn't an ordinary customer. When he spoke, his voice was calm, yet carried the kind of authority that made the entire room fall silent. "Officer," he said evenly, "I couldn't help overhearing your conversation. You might want to think carefully about what you're doing here." The room held its breath. If this moment touches your heart, remember, sometimes the smallest act of courage can change everything. Brennan turned toward the stranger, irritation flashing in his eyes. But something in the man's steady gaze made him hesitate. He puffed out his chest anyway, trying to reassert control. "And who exactly are you supposed to be?" Brennan demanded, his tone dripping with sarcasm. "Some city hotshot who thinks he knows how we do things around here?" The man didn't flinch. Still seated, he set his phone on the counter, calmly, deliberately. "My name is Jonathan Hartwell," he said quietly. "And I think you're making a mistake that's going to follow you for a very long time." The name hit the room like a wave. Rose didn't recognize it, but she noticed the sudden change in everyone's expression. Martinez had gone rigid. Young Walsh looked pale. Brennan, however, didn't get it. "Hartwell," he scoffed. "Never heard of you." Martinez swallowed hard. "Sir, are you related to Hartwell Industries?" Jonathan gave a single nod. "I'm the CEO." He looked directly at Rose then, his voice softening. "And I've been sitting here for the past hour watching one of the most genuine examples of strength and grace I've seen in years." He gestured toward her gently. "This woman has treated every person here with kindness and respect, even while being insulted by those who should be setting an example." The name Hartwell Industries hit the diner like a thunderclap. Even Rose froze. Everyone in Millbrook knew that name. Hartwell Industries wasn't just a company, it was the company. It employed half the county, funded the hospital's new children's wing, rebuilt the library, and sponsored college scholarships for dozens of local kids. Their foundation had kept the town alive when other industries had pulled out years ago. Now, the man standing in front of them, calm, collected, and quietly commanding, was that Hartwell. Brennan's face turned pale, but pride wouldn't let him back down completely. "Look, Mr. Hartwell," he said stiffly, "I don't know what you think you heard, but we were just having a conversation with a waitress. Nothing inappropriate about it." Jonathan didn't raise his voice. He simply lifted his phone, tapping the screen. "I recorded everything," he said evenly. "Every word, every insult, every threat about health codes and taxes, every remark about this woman's personal life." The room fell silent. Rose could hear her own heartbeat, fast, uneven, and feel her baby move restlessly, as if sensing her fear. She looked around. Brennan's face had gone completely white. Martinez closed his eyes, visibly pained. Young Walsh exhaled in quiet relief. Jonathan's voice stayed calm, but it carried a quiet power that filled the diner. "I was thinking about my mother while sitting here," he said. "She raised me alone after my father left. Worked 3 jobs just to keep food on the table. I remember how people used to look at us, like we didn't belong, like we were worth less because we didn't fit their idea of a proper family." He stood, leaving money for his meal and a generous tip beside his coffee cup. Then he looked at Rose. "My mother always told me," he continued softly, "that you can tell who someone really is by how they treat people who can't fight back, people who are just doing their best in hard times." Rose's tears flowed freely now, but these were different. They weren't from shame or fear. They were from gratitude. For the first time since losing Michael, someone wasn't just pitying her, they were honoring her. Jonathan stepped closer, meeting her eyes. "Ma'am, what I saw today was one of the most graceful and courageous things I've witnessed in years. You kept your dignity when others lost theirs. That child you're carrying is lucky to have a mother like you." Then he turned toward the officers, his tone cooling but still controlled. "I'll be speaking with Chief Morrison tomorrow morning," he said firmly. "And with the mayor and city council after that. Hartwell Industries contributes a great deal to this town, and we expect the people supported by our tax dollars to represent our values: respect, empathy, and human decency." Brennan opened his mouth to argue, but Martinez grabbed his arm quickly. "We should go," he said under his breath. "Now." The 3 officers left in silence, the doorbell jingling behind them. The moment they were gone, the air inside the diner shifted, from tension to something like relief. People exhaled. A few even clapped quietly. But Rose just stood there, her emotions tangled: relief, fear, uncertainty. Her job still mattered more than anything. She needed this. And she didn't know what kind of backlash might come next. Jonathan seemed to sense it. He lowered his voice as he turned back to her. "I know this probably made things complicated for you," he said gently. "But please know, this won't end here. When good people stay silent, bad people believe they can keep getting away with it." Rose nodded, still trembling. "Thank you," she whispered. I can't lose this job. I have to take care of my baby." Jonathan's expression softened. "You won't," he said quietly. "Not if I have anything to say about it." Narrator, As Jonathan Hartwell stood to leave that day, Rose had no idea her life was about to change forever. What began as a humiliating morning in a small-town diner was about to turn into something she never imagined, the start of a new chapter, filled with hope. 3 days later, early morning, Mel's Diner. The bell above the door jingled softly as Rose entered, tying her apron and preparing for another long shift. But then she froze. Sitting at the same counter where the confrontation had happened was Jonathan Hartwell. A cup of coffee in one hand, a folder of papers in front of him, the county's most powerful man smiled warmly as she approached. "I hope you don't mind," he said, motioning to the empty stool beside him. "I was hoping we could talk." Rose hesitated, then poured herself some water and sat down slowly, her hand instinctively resting on her belly. The baby had been unusually active all morning, as if it could sense something important was about to happen. "I heard Officer Brennan got suspended," she said quietly. "I hope it wasn't just because of what happened here." Jonathan shook his head. "No." After that day, others came forward. Turns out Brennan had a long history of abuse and intimidation. The recording we made just confirmed what many already knew. It finally gave people the courage to speak. He turned the folder toward her. Inside were medical bills, bank statements, and official-looking forms. "I've been thinking about our conversation," Jonathan said. "About my mother, and about you. I'd like to propose something, if you're willing to hear me out." Rose blinked, feeling both nervous and overwhelmed. "What kind of proposal?" Jonathan leaned forward, his voice calm but sincere. "Hartwell Industries is looking for someone to manage our corporate dining facilities, someone who can oversee staff, ensure hospitality, and represent our values. It's a stable position, with full health coverage, maternity care, and on-site child care." Rose stared at him in disbelief. I don't understand. Why would you offer this to me? You don't even know if I'm qualified." Jonathan smiled gently. "Rose, I watched you that day. You handled cruelty with grace. You stayed calm under pressure, kept working through pain, and showed every person in that room what true professionalism looks like. That's exactly the kind of strength we need, and the kind of person I want representing this company." At that moment, the baby kicked hard, and Rose gasped. Jonathan immediately stood, worried. "Are you okay? Should I call someone?" Rose laughed softly, wiping her eyes. No, it's fine. I think the baby just likes the sound of health insurance." But beneath her laughter, she felt a storm of emotions: gratitude, fear, disbelief. "Mr. Hartwell," she said finally, her voice trembling, "this offer, it's too generous. Please tell me you're not doing this because you feel sorry for me. I don't want pity. I just want to earn my way." Jonathan nodded, his expression thoughtful. "When I was 12, he began, "my mother worked nights as a janitor and cleaned houses by day. One night, I went with her to the office building because our babysitter couldn't come. The owner showed up unexpectedly and found me there. I thought we were in trouble." He smiled faintly at the memory. "But instead of scolding her, he sat with me, helped me with my math homework. Then he offered my mother a better job, a receptionist position that changed our lives. I never forgot that. He didn't give her charity, he gave her a chance." Jonathan looked directly at Rose. "And that's all I'm offering you, a chance. To build a future for you and your child. To show that decency and hard work still matter in this world." Rose felt her throat tighten. She couldn't speak. All she could do was nod as tears filled her eyes, not from sorrow, but from something far deeper. Hope. Better hours. Better pay. A chance to use her head instead of just her hands. Rose listened as Jonathan spoke about his mother and the chance that had changed her life. "That job changed everything for us," he said. "She worked her way up to office manager, then went back to school and became a social worker. She spent the rest of her life helping families through hard times. That wouldn't have happened if someone hadn't seen her and given her a break." He looked at Rose with quiet seriousness. "This isn't charity. It's a smart hire. You showed poise under fire, more than many people I know who sit behind desks. That matters. If this position also helps your life turn a corner, then all the better." Rose felt the familiar lump in her throat. Tears came again, but these were different, softer, full of hope. Jonathan smiled gently. "Take your time," he told her. "We'll want you to start after your maternity leave. Family comes first." She left the diner that day holding a folder that might change everything. It felt unreal. Sometimes the biggest shifts come on ordinary mornings, and sometimes the people who help you most are the ones who quietly sit beside you and listen. 6 months later, Rose stood in Hartwell Industries' polished corporate kitchen, watching her team of 5 move with practiced ease as they prepared a lunch for the board. The space was nothing like Mel's: gleaming counters, stainless steel equipment, menus planned to the last detail, but Rose fit into it naturally. She had a new rhythm now: planning, organizing, managing people. Her instincts from the diner translated perfectly into anticipating needs and smoothing problems before they began. Her son, Michael James Patterson, named after his father, was 2 floors below in the company's childcare center, probably smiling at whoever was holding him. Knowing he was safe and nearby changed everything for Rose. She could work and still be a mother at the same time. The first weeks had been scary. She worried she'd made a mistake, that she wasn't ready for a job with that much responsibility. But Jonathan was patient. He let her learn, asked questions instead of making demands, and trusted her judgment. Her suggestions, small menu changes, friendlier signage in the dining room, ways to make staff breaks calmer and kinder, were welcomed and rolled out across the company. The practical difference was huge. Her salary covered rent, bills, groceries. Her health plan paid for prenatal and baby care. She slept better. There were no more nights of wondering whether she could afford medicine or whether the lights would stay on. For the first time since Michael's death, Rose could breathe. The change went deeper than money. Jonathan became more than an employer. He became a friend and an ally. They talked honestly about the hard parts: single parenting, grief that arrived unexpectedly at odd hours, the guilt that sometimes sat heavy when she heard a song the two of them had loved. Jonathan listened because he had seen similar struggles in his own family. His respect helped Rose see herself as capable, not broken. What surprised Rose most was how far the moment at Mel's had reached. People in town were talking about how service workers were treated. Conversations began in church groups, at the bakery, in the mayor's office. Chief Morrison introduced new training for officers about courtesy, restraint, and how words can harm. The city council opened discussions about better support for working parents and more resources for families in transition. Rose's story became a quiet catalyst, not a headline that vanished the next day, but a slow shift in how her town thought about respect and responsibility. People began to notice and to act. One afternoon, standing in the Hartwell kitchen as her team plated a final dish, Rose looked down at a photograph clipped to the bulletin board, a picture of her with baby Michael James, laughing on a bright spring morning. She felt grateful, not because someone had saved her, but because someone had seen her and offered a real chance. She had taken it, and she was building a life on her own terms. And every now and then, when a new face arrived at company dining and seemed unsure or scared, Rose would kneel down, smile, and ask, "Can I get you anything? You look like you could use a friend." The city council soon passed a resolution committing to treat every citizen with fairness and respect. Officer Brennan was quietly reassigned after completing sensitivity training, while Martinez stopped by Hartwell Industries one afternoon to personally apologize to Rose for not stepping in sooner. As for young Walsh, he'd become something of a local hero, especially among service workers, for standing up to his senior officer. His courage didn't go unnoticed. He was promoted to detective ahead of schedule. Even Mel's Diner saw its own transformation. Jonathan became a loyal customer, often bringing business partners for what he called real food made by real people. Other executives followed his example, and soon the diner was busier than ever. Mel hired 2 new servers, replaced the old coffee machine, and finally fixed that flickering neon sign that had been buzzing for years. That afternoon, as Rose arranged the finishing touches on the day's presentation, salmon Wellington with roasted vegetables and a light herb sauce, she paused for a moment to breathe it all in. Her idea of strength had changed. For months after Michael's death, she thought strength meant carrying every burden alone, never asking for help, never showing weakness. But now she understood that real strength sometimes meant accepting help given with respect, not pity. It meant recognizing that your worth isn't measured by your struggles, but by the kindness and integrity you bring into the world. She'd learned that courage came in many shapes. It was the courage to keep working when others tried to humiliate you. The courage to say yes to a new opportunity when fear told you it was too good to be true. And the courage to trust again, to believe that there were still good people in the world. As Jonathan entered the dining room with his board members, Rose caught his eye and smiled. He had kept his promise from that day at Mel's. This wasn't about charity. It was about believing in someone's worth and giving them the space to rise. For Rose, it was proof that life had a way of bringing the right people together at the right moment. She often thought about what her son, baby Michael, would one day learn from all of this. He'd know that life can knock you down, but that kindness and courage can always help you stand again. He'd understand that good people still exist, that helping someone in need is never wasted, and that his father's spirit lived on in the strength and compassion his mother carried forward every day. As the board enjoyed their meal, laughter and quiet conversation filling the elegant dining room, Rose felt a deep sense of peace. Not just gratitude for her job or stability, but for the reminder that her story wasn't over. It was simply the start of a new chapter, one built on dignity, kindness, and second chances.